are back with the Hubscale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. This week, we have Nir Valtman, co-founder and CEO of Arnica. He's been a practitioner for nearly 20 years, and he begun his entrepreneurial journey 2 years ago. I'm super excited to dive into these topics today. Nir, it is awesome to have you on the show.
Thanks for the invite, Elliot. I'm really happy to be here.
No, good stuff, good stuff. So for all the listeners that don't know you, it'd be great to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Awesome. So technically I'm a security practitioner, put aside, all the titles of CEOs, founders, and such. I think that the best thing that describes me or my history is that although I am an entrepreneur, although I am a founder of a company, especially in security, my background is coming from both being, more on the hands-on side as well as some of the management side. Before Arnica was a VP security in a company called Finastra. Most people are maybe not familiar with the name, but it's the third largest fintech after Fiserv and FIS. So back then, I did quite a lot of things around application security, DevSecOps. If you wonder, it's not the same. Did some data security and security architecture and such. Beforehand, had a bit different management role, a bit wider in its scope in a smaller company called Cabbage. I was a CISO there, and beforehand, and that's pretty much how far we can go with that. I was the first head of AppSec for NCR, the National Cash Register. So I think that the benefit that I brought with me, throughout the history was, I worked for a public company, for a private, relatively small, let's call it the mid-market size, and then a private equity company. So I saw the three different angles of how security is perceived in companies. But when I became a founder, I just learned that there are way more perspectives that others can bring to the table than the ones that I had. So that's me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's an awesome journey as an entrepreneur as well. The one that you have, spending so long being a practitioner from a CISO to an EVP and everything along those lines. I think it's awesome to take that leap. I know a couple of others who's done that as well, and they say it's amazing. But there's a few things on here that we're going to go through today, which is super exciting. But before going into that, tell me about Arnica. Tell me why you started the company, and tell me about that journey as well.
Oh, that was really an interesting story. As a matter of fact, we tried to solve a problem within Finastra. Initially, the problem that we tried to solve was around certain work that we did manually around access management to source code. And the reason why we had to do that manually is because we were a regulated company. And in some cases, when you especially deploy continuously to the cloud, access to code means access to cloud. And therefore, we were required to do all of those access reviews, and we spent approximately 18 months on that process every year. Think about it; it's a big company. When that happened, I said, you know what? Maybe we can automate that. Maybe we can look at some behaviors of developers, and based on that, we can just reduce permissions. And I just went and developed the solution by myself. I didn't go to VCs. I didn't go anywhere else. I just wanted to play with something as evening leisure time projects. When I built it, and think about Finastra's size, about 10,000 employees, it took a few days to run, but it was built in a good enough scale. And then I realized that maybe other people will have that challenge. So I spoke with other people, saw that it is a challenge, maybe not that big at that time. But then I started to dig more and more into what is actually painful in that space of, let's call it Git posture. And we identified a few more issues, maybe around software supply chain security attacks. We identified a lot of anomalies in that space. And that kind of caused me initially to build an idea or a thought process about how can we prevent those attacks. And then I said, let's talk with a few folks that I trust that maybe not necessarily come from security. And I spoke with my two co-founders. Eran is our CTO, and Diko is our COO. Diko came from an operational, background. So I asked him from an operational standpoint if he saw the pain anywhere else, and I asked Eran if he saw that pain from other angles. And everyone we kind of got it at the same moment that we just spoke about it. And shortly after, about 50 conversations in with the different people, we just, decided to go and pitch it to a VC. Fortunately, the first VC that we pitched to is the VC that invested in us. So it was a luck, I think. Maybe it's the time, maybe it's hopefully it's the team as well. But eventually, that's essentially the thing that caused us to kick off Arnica. Fast forward, we're about two years after the establishment of the company. We did start from that angle that we knew where we want to start with, but as of today, we ended up in a place where we look at the security of the entire development ecosystem in essentially three types of assets that you want to protect. You want to protect the developers, you want to protect the source code that you have in the company, and you want to protect the product that you deliver, maybe the product that you deploy to production or sell to customers. So we brought essentially that concept that on the development side, we provide a lot of self-service capabilities to developers that help them to protect themselves. On the protecting the source code, we do have access management, as I mentioned before, but we also scan for hard-coded secrets, for example, which caused a lot of breaches recently. And we validate those secrets. So we actually make sure that the secrets are real to reduce that noise. And if that's not enough, we actually fix those secrets for developers. So we kind of really focus on that developer experience to make sure that developers are happy with a security solution. And lastly, on protecting the product, we build that piece that actually runs few scanners on software composition analysis that identifies third-party packages that might have either vulnerabilities or malicious, identify infrastructure as code vulnerabilities and static code analysis, license violations and such. But again, there are many companies that do that. So like why we have Arnica and why there are so many others. And the main hook that we see today with customers is essentially not about the what we do, but more about the how we do things. And the how is something that we brought. We call it a pipeline-less security approach, which means that you don't need pipelines to run security scans. You can have pipelines, but you don't need them. And the concept essentially means that anytime that you push code or save your code on your Git repositories, we scan it. Every time that you want to merge your code, we scan it. So it got us to the place that we actually scan real time everything. And the reason why we can do that is because the development team within Arnica is everyone, one by one, are experts in Git. So we utilize it in such a special way that allows us to run it with low-cost operations and essentially charge less the customers. So that's kind of in a nutshell about how we do things and such. And obviously, other companies in the space have prioritization and identifying kind of what is more important, what is less important. Yeah, of course, we do that as well. But we also answer a fundamental question that, by the way, I had that in every company that I work for. It's, classify what is important. Fine, I can go to maybe to the CFO, to the CTO, maybe strategy teams. I can ask what is important. But let's say that we do that automatically. What Arnica does that is very special, and I was so happy when we developed it, is that we also answer the question of who is best equipped to resolve issues where it's important for me. Because when you're an AppSec practitioner, you don't necessarily know all developers. So that is where you see a benefit of actually knowing who you need to speak with to resolve the issues. So whatever it's important, who do I assign it to? Right? That's gonna hopefully didn't make it a whole pitch, but just tell the story.
No. I know it was amazing. I honestly, I love the story because obviously you've been at multiple different areas. You've been a practitioner for so long. You thought of the idea whilst working in one of the largest fintechs in the world. And then now it's you've taken that from inception and creating a product on your own to building a business off the back of it. I think it's awesome. Yeah, I really do. And I love the story behind it. And I think that moves on to kind of the next question a little bit. Obviously, moving from a CISO and a practitioner into the entrepreneur and being a CEO. First of all, just tell me about that transition, and then kind of break it down because obviously there was a huge business, right? There was 12,000 people, 10,000 people before moving into and starting on your own. So tell me about that transition as well.
Yeah, so I think that when you are a practitioner, you live in the world of problem that you try to solve. Mm-hmm. You have your goals in that company, and you want to show progress on how that company operates. So although, yeah, I always spoke with peers. I always, found people in conferences and dinners and such, and tried to understand what other companies are doing, as well as reading from, analyst reports. But at the end of the day, when you are a practitioner, your sole focus is not about what you can do, is about what you do the day to day and how do you drive that ship or get that ship to the right direction. So as a practitioner, obviously you have a lot of that hands-on experience, and regardless if you're in management or as an individual contributor, that you actually see the pains that the audience that is impacted by a potential product, like what Arnica does, actually see. So that helped a lot in building the thesis around the product. But now we're at the point that, I am a security vendor. Arnica is a security vendor. And, the conversations that I had before, like peer conversations, some of them are not that easy now because some people think that I want to sell, although the people that know me know that I'm not really selling. We have other people for that, although I'm expected to sell in some sense. So I'm having more peer conversations, more listening to what they are doing. Always, of course, happy to share, but now my goals are completely different than only securing the company that I work for. Now my goals are related to, getting, talking with investors and making sure that the employees in the company are happy and the deliverables that we commit to customers are delivered on time and the quality that we want. Then we have, some of the leap of faith that we developed, which is, think about it as maybe 15% of what we do is a leap of faith that we can hear customers saying, hey, not top priority, but would be great to have. But the rest is really built based on customer feedback. So how do you collect that customer feedback and actually build something that is more commercialized rather than one-offs that you build as a practitioner? So there's a lot of changes between, as I mentioned, the view of the problem as well as the scope and the goals that you have in the company. So it's the way that I like to describe that to the team in the company is that if you're always in an uncomfortable spot, we're doing something right.
I love it. I love it a lot. And it's pretty interesting you mentioned there about kind of not just building one a product for one kind of area or one kind of customer. I was reading the Okta co-founder book, and he was saying about you have to kind of find your ICP and don't just build everything for one massive customer and things on those lines as well. So tell me about that kind of early doors then, obviously finding your first customers. I can imagine being a practitioner for so long, you've got a great network of that you can kind of verify it with as well, which you were talking about earlier. So tell me about the early days then, really finding the first customers and things like that.
Yeah, so initially when we built the product, it was mainly a security operations or DevSecOps type of a product, because essentially access management is something that you won't see many application security teams are handling. You can see in IAM teams handling, or you can see the DevOps team that handles access to Git, or even some other companies you can see engineering teams that control certain permissions if you have any platform engineering or something like that. So initially we said, yeah, I mean, the audience that we want to sell to is the audience that manages access, which was mainly DevOps and engineering teams. And we started to sell to those types of customers until we've got some appetite from the AppSec teams that were brought in and started to look at the hard-coded secrets, for example, and the other, security scanners. And the more we shifted towards, more security functionality in the code, in the product, we started to gain way more traction from application security teams. And as of today, the majority of our customers or customers' ICPs are application security teams. It's not so we built the product with the intention to have good developer experience for the operator, which is typically DevOps, or the developers that are being impacted by the product. But the ICP has shifted, but the users that are impacted by the product have not. So regardless what we do, think about the operator side that you sell to, obviously, that we need to consider them as the buyers and the main users of the product. But developers never log into Arnica, and because the thesis is that developers should not log into Arnica at all, and because we built it in such a way, we have heavy emphasis regardless if we go to one ICP or another, which is how do we make sure that those developers that are being impacted by the product are happy as much as they can be happy, and essentially the ICP looks good when he or she or that team operates Arnica to make that change, to drive that change within the organization. So that's a long answer to who is the ICP, but the ICP needs to look good in front of the ones that are actually impacted by the product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, so that's super exciting. And I guess obviously, so locating that ICP at the early doors, maybe a little bit of a shift who he was working with when the AppSec teams came along. But tell me about kind of building the early doors team, because obviously when scaling, I've had multiple entrepreneurs on this podcast, and everybody kind of says the same thing but slightly different. So I'd love to hear your kind of perspective, your kind of experience in building that early doors team.
Oh, you just don't ask anyone and you build it. I hope that no one says that. But on a more serious note, I know that there are some fundamentals that you need to have when you kick off your journey, right? You need to speak with customers that have an appetite to collaborate with early stage companies. In some cases, companies that don't even have a product, and they want to help you build that product. But at the end of the day, not everyone who is willing to collaborate with you are the companies that will be your ICP, or that target companies that you will see in the next 2 years and such. So maybe, for example, maybe you'll take a small company with 20 employees, and that would be your design partner, but they don't see the challenges that maybe even a company with 1,000 employees sees. So that's kind of, you need to know who you need to pick as your design partners. You must have design partners that believe in you, mainly in you, less in the product, because there's no product. But at the same token, maybe worth mentioning that there's what you ask from customers, and that's the majority of the feedback that you have. But there's also what you believe that needs to happen with a product. And I know that in some cases, it sounds very egoistic, maybe. In some cases, you're right and everyone's wrong, but it's very rare. but in other cases, when you're wrong, it wastes the time and money that you have within the company. So it's really important to listen, not necessarily do everything that customers want. You need to pick your battles, but always have that state of mind of the vision of the company, because you built it from a specific reason. And if you go towards that vision and the customer feedback is the essentially building blocks together, then take it with two hands, run across other design partners, ask them as well, and start building that. I can tell that we did have some cases where we had certain assumptions that were the wrong assumptions. And we spoke with certain design partners, and we ended up with others that said, it's completely different than what we do. Which in that case, you either go and double down on the development, or you just give up on that customer, which is not easy, early stage. But on the other side, it happened a few times that we wanted to surprise, in quotes, surprise our customers and bring just some, thought leadership that no one asked specifically, but we saw some interest because it was fairly new concept. And that's how, for those assumptions that we had that they were correct, that's where we saw jaw drops, essentially. And those moments are amazing, because it's way better than saying, hey, you're going to have this feature, and the customer gets the feature. It's way better when you say, hey, we built something, this is what we have in the dev environment, what do you think about that? And you let them maybe click through and look at the functionality and see how they get excited about something. So again, I don't know if everyone go towards that direction of listen to customers and such, but that's what we do.
Yeah, I like the insight there. I think it's quite cool, actually, because obviously you need to have that creativity behind you as well, and take things to customers that maybe they're not expecting. But no, I really like that as well. But how about kind of the hiring piece? Obviously you built a team already. You're hiring on multiple different things. But how was that kind of the first batch of hires that you've made so far? What were the problems you faced, and what advice would you give to people going on that journey as well?
Yeah. So initially we brought the hires that we know. It's all about the people that you can trust at the beginning, that can actually help you build the product. That they will, give everything to build it. Obviously, you need to make sure that those people are competent to build what you need. But that was one thing that we did. The other thing that we did is we actually there were a few people that we didn't know beforehand. And what we agreed, the three co-founders, is that if we interview someone, all the three of us need to agree on that individual. Because it can be the culture that we build that may be impacted if we hired the wrong person. It may be, the professional, obviously, knowledge. It can be anything that can move things to the wrong direction in the company. So that's why we made that agreement. And some of the hires were good. Some of the hires were not the best fit, maybe, a few months in. And I think one of the most important things to do, especially at the beginning, is that that's what I say to everyone. If you have a doubt about someone, don't have that doubt. You don't have the time. You can separate in a respective way. Even, some of the people that we separated from, I helped them to find another job because they were a better fit for the other job. So a separation doesn't mean that, you're not going to talk with those people anymore. It just, it's a good relationship to maintain. Yeah, so that's mainly the main things that we started doing. Another use case that we had was actually with Simon here is, on mute. But so, for example, we needed some help with, marketing, go-to-market, product marketing. And, we engaged with Simon, and Simon was a good fit for us as a consultant, hourly from time to time that we needed some help. And at some point, we had such a big need for that. And with all of the difficulties that we had to, convince Simon to join, we are happy that he eventually joined. So it can also be a partial engagement that you get an advisor to work with you a little bit, feel that you actually can work together, and then at the right time, you get the right people into your company. So sometimes it's also worth waiting for someone.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And just touching on the advisor piece there, like I did a post on LinkedIn about this the other day, actually, just about go-to-market and advisors and things, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So obviously Simon came on as the advisor. How important was that? Not just only to figure out the cultural side, if you guys would want to work together, but how much value did they provide coming on as an advisor as well?
When he came as an advisor, obviously we saw all the value that he provided to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't try to hire him. But but it was very helpful for us because one, we didn't have the capacity to do all of that work, and two, sometimes you need to bring a fresh mind to ask the right questions, because sometimes you're going around with the wrong questions. And when you bring someone that has, in Simon's case, he had product experience, more product, less marketing, but you can bring in someone that is not necessarily marketing first and then product when you look to get into, let's say, marketing or a growth role. A growth role means that it's a hacker, and you care less about what is the background of that person. It's very similar to, and without underestimating this, but it's very similar to hiring a student out of college, right? You know that a student has some background. You know that the student, during their interviews, that student will ask the right questions, will challenge everything you do, or double click and be super excited about what you do. And you bet on that person. You don't bet on the current competency, you bet on the person to be the best fit for the company for the next few years, at least. And that's what happened, in few cases that we have within Arnica. It can be a product manager that is not necessarily a security expert, but you know that he'll be a security expert by being a product manager. In some cases, you see that people come with a background, but they already have the state of mind of what it is, and that is hard to change. So learning from scratch has a lot of benefits, and that's what we like to see as well.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like the again, it's great advice, because sometimes when you're hiring people, I see this all the time with being a recruiter myself, but people just want the X background and they want to be doing this for the past 10 years, for example. But if you actually think outside the box and get people who could be more creative or more driven, I think it's a really good idea. So Nir, taking it kind of to the future of everything, right? So tell me your thoughts on, number one, the future of security itself, and then obviously within the AppSec world as well.
Yeah, so I think that everyone talked today about generative AI and the benefits of it. So the way that I'm thinking about application security in general is that there's more development happening right now. Developers are more productive, and because they're more productive, they write more code. Some of that is obviously, generated by AI, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have the right AI to scan for the vulnerabilities that maybe the developers can bring. It can be, just simple vulnerabilities that are easy to fix in code, but it can also be logical errors and other things that developers can introduce that is really hard to identify just by scanning the code. So the way that I'm thinking about it is that the role of application security will change over time. What will happen is that you will have way more automation that comes with AppSec. This is why I also mentioned pipelineless. You want to scan as early as possible with 100% coverage, regardless if the developer wants to install something on the workstation or not. You just need to scan everything. And by doing that, you can get to the point that developers are more empowered to make a fix before it reaches out to the application security teams. And I know that there's a huge trend around empowering developers to do more and more security and such. But at the end of the day, think about it this way, if you provide a private feedback to a developer that says, hey, Elliot, you just introduced a new vulnerability. It's right now. It's not something you introduced 5 months ago. You just wrote it, you just saved your work, and there's a new thing. It's very likely that you will fix it before you will try to merge that code into whatever production branch. And therefore, that concept of shifting left is not shifting, the work left, is shifting the automation and work left. And that brings a lot of obviously benefits that at some point, I think that on one hand, application security teams will be able to focus more on the logical issues that are not necessarily, identifiable by a piece of software. But also the thought process that I have around, ticket management is also a bit different towards that future. Because, when a developer writes code and maybe the developer introduces a vulnerability, let's say that the developer now wants to take that code and push it to a production environment. The first thing that needs to happen when a vulnerability is introduced is, as usual, open a ticket. Right? Open a ticket in Jira, open a ticket in my GitHub, whatever. And my thought process is that if you open a ticket, it's already too late. So therefore, I do see that world in which, on one hand, software development is unimpeded by risk, which means that they can take that, they can dismiss issues, they can fix issues, but on the flip side as well, make sure that the application security teams, they are not impeding, they're not opening up too much risk, and they do all of that by that automation that lets the developers fix any vulnerabilities that they introduce, and only the things that they cannot fix or disagree on fixing will be the ones that the security teams will need to review. So just doing way more automatically with less resources.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, it's super insightful. There's lots that could go on in the future, and I think you've kind of touched on quite a few key points there. We're running towards the end of the podcast here, but I always like to ask this one question before kind of leaving things for the day. If you could go back to the beginning of your career, what would you tell yourself?
That's a good question. I think I'd tell myself, whatever choice you make, just be confident in that choice and don't look back. Because there is always what ifs that you will have. And what ifs just make you think about things that may or may not happen. So for me, I'm very happy with the choices that I've made. And I hope that next choices will be good as well. And if not, we'll fix those choices. It's good to be wrong sometimes, as long as you know how to see it and take the next decision to make it better.
Yeah, no, love it. No, great advice. Well, Nir, I appreciate you coming on the show. Good luck with everything with Arnica, and I'll be watching from the sidelines as you grow as well. But no, good luck with everything, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Elliot. My pleasure.